Frederick Cromwell and Veronica Vance were the two greatest legends in the legal world. He was in South City, an undefeated myth in criminal law. She was in North City, a victor in every civil case she took. Within the circle, they were known as one in the South, one in the North, kings who never meet. What no one knew was that 3 years ago, Veronica Vance had hidden her identity and married Frederick Cromwell. She chose to be his docile wife, making him soup, accompanying him to business dinners, and always leaving a light on for him. But now, she was done pretending. Standing before the floor-to-ceiling window, Veronica's fingertip hovered over her phone screen for 3 seconds before finally dialing a number that had lain dormant for 3 years. "Vivian," the shocked voice of Charles Preston came from the other end. "Am I dreaming?" "I'm coming back," she said, her voice soft, yet it sliced through the years of silence like a knife. "You're serious?" The coffee cup in Charles's hand crashed to the floor, his voice trembling with excitement. "This is fantastic. Do you have any idea how badly Frederick Cromwell has crushed our firm these past few years? After you retired, he snatched 20 major criminal cases from us. One after another, we've been under his thumb for 3 years, barely able to breathe," he continued. "Countless people have been lining up, waiting for you to take their cases. The moment news of your return gets out, the entire legal world is going to feel an earthquake." Veronica looked up, gazing at her reflection in the glass. Her long hair fell obediently over her shoulders. She wore a beige loungewear set, her apron still stained with oil from the soup she'd made tonight. Looking at her now, no one would ever imagine this was the queen of the courtroom, who once drove opponents to a complete breakdown in court. "By the way, all these years, did Frederick ever find out who you are, did he?" "He doesn't need to know. I've already decided to divorce him," Veronica cut him off. "The next time we meet, it will be in court." After hanging up, just as Veronica was about to turn back to her room, her phone vibrated again. It was a message from Frederick. "Drank too much at a networking event. Come get me." Veronica stared at the message for a long time. 3 years, he was always like this. Every time he spoke to her, his words were as curt as a boss giving orders to a subordinate. At the Nocturne Lounge, inside the VIP suite, just as Veronica was about to push the door open, she heard a burst of laughter from within. "Frederick, how many wins in a row is that now? You're an undefeated myth. Is there any case in this world you can't win? I'm telling you, everyone else is just cannon fodder for you." "Not entirely," someone else chimed in. "There used to be Vivian who could hold her own against him. It's a shame she suddenly retired 3 years ago and vanished without a trace. She probably got married. It's been 3 years, she might even have kids by now. She's not coming back." "Ha ha ha, you never know. Frederick's been married for 3 years too, and forget kids, he practically lives at the law firm and never goes home. But speaking of which, it's been 3 years. Are you still not into Veronica Vance? Do you even have to ask? Frederick can't stand that gentle, doting, good wife type. If she hadn't crawled into his bed when he was drunk, you think he would have married her. Frederick likes independent, strong women who are his equals, like Juliana Ashwood. How many years has it been, and he still can't forget her?" Hearing the name Juliana Ashwood, Veronica's eyes darkened. She pushed the door open and walked in. The entire suite fell silent in an instant. Everyone exchanged awkward glances. Veronica ignored them, her gaze sweeping the room until it landed on Frederick. He was completely drunk, leaning back on the sofa with his eyes closed. His handsome, cold features were cut into light and shadow by the dim lighting. She walked over and helped him up. His arm rested on her shoulder, the weight making her stumble slightly. The familiar scent of fur, mixed with alcohol, rushed over her, making her feel dazed for a moment. The last time they had been this close was on that absurd night 3 years ago. Just as she managed to get him into the backseat, he suddenly grabbed her wrist and pulled her into his arms. A warm sensation touched her lips. She froze. In 3 years of marriage, aside from that one accident, he had never kissed her. Until he mumbled a name, his voice thick with drink. Juliana, so he had mistaken her for someone else. A sharp pain pierced Veronica's heart. She stared deeply at the man before her. "Do you really love her that much?" Frederick didn't answer. He only tightened his grip on the back of her head, his kiss turning almost savage. His fingertips tangled in her hair as if trying to merge her into his very bones. His hot breath fanned across her face. Behind her was the closed car door. There was no escape. She could only close her eyes and endure it. When the kiss ended, he whispered against her lips, still lost in his drunken haze, "Don't leave me." Veronica slowly closed her eyes. After a long moment, she took a document out of her file folder and held it in front of him. "If you don't want me to leave, then sign this." Frederick looked at her with blurry, drunken eyes. Veronica knew he was looking through her, seeing someone else. But in the end, he signed his name on the agreement. Frederick Cromwell, once the 1-month cooling-off period is over and we get the divorce certificate, we'll both be free. Veronica let out a self-deprecating laugh, staring at the signed divorce agreement in her hand as thoughts churned in her mind. The moonlight filtered in softly. She suddenly remembered the first time she had seen Frederick Cromwell. It was at an interstate case. At the time, she had just won a major lawsuit. The defendant had lost miserably. As she walked out of the courthouse, the man rushed toward her, his hands wrapping around her neck in a mad frenzy. As she choked, struggling for air, a hand suddenly clamped down on the man's wrist with a force so brutal she could almost hear the bone crack. "Attacking someone at the courthouse entrance? Are you trying to get a longer sentence?" The low, cold voice brushed against her eardrum like the edge of a blade. Veronica looked up and met a pair of pitch-black eyes. Her heart skipped a beat. Later, she learned that the man who had saved her was none other than her unseen rival Frederick Cromwell. From that day on, she began to take frequent business trips to South City. She saw him in court, reducing his opponents to silence. She saw him standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, smoking. She even started to frequent the clubs he went to for networking, but he never once recognized her. Until that night, when she found a dead drunk Frederick in a bar. He gripped her wrist, his voice hoarse. "Why did you have to leave?" She didn't understand what he meant, but before she could think, his kisses fell upon her like a torrential storm. That night, they were lost in a moment of passion. When she woke up the next day, he stared at the bloodstain on the sheets for a long time. "I'll take responsibility. Let's get married." Veronica was silent for a moment before nodding. She immediately resigned from her job, hiding her identity as Vivian to marry him. After they married, he remained utterly cold, rarely coming home and never sharing a bed with her again. She thought it was just his natural disposition, and believed she could warm his heart with her gentleness. Until one day, she found that photograph in his study. In the photo, a girl in a white dress stood on a bridge in Cambridge, her smile blindingly bright. The words on the back stabbed into her heart like a knife. "If I can't marry you, then it doesn't matter who I marry." Later, she found out that was his first love, the famous pianist, Juliana Ashwood. After graduation, Juliana chose to study abroad and broke up with him. All these years, he had never forgotten her. The night he got so drunk was because he had learned that Juliana had found a new love abroad. In their 3 years of marriage, she had seen him frown at the birthday cake she made for him, seen him dump the dinner she had carefully prepared into the trash, and even seen him, after learning of Juliana's return to the country, abandon her on the highway while she was on her period, making a frantic U-turn to go pick Juliana up from the airport. In that moment, Veronica's heart died completely. She wasn't so pathetic as to single-mindedly chase a man whose heart had no room for her. Not to mention, he had already given his heart to someone else. That being the case, why not go back to being Vivian and grant him and Juliana their happy ending? After putting the divorce agreement in her bag, she drove home. Once she got Frederick settled in his room, she began packing her things through the night. The next morning, a hungover Frederick woke up to the sight of boxes piled on the floor. He frowned, his voice cold and clear. "What are you doing?" Veronica's hands, which were folding clothes, paused for a moment before she resumed her task. "Just packing some clothes." Since they had married, scenes like this were common. Frederick assumed she was just doing household chores and didn't think much of it, getting up to wash his face. After packing the last few items, Veronica put the suitcases back in their place just as the doorbell rang. She wondered who could be visiting so early. When she opened the door, she saw Juliana Ashwood. Dressed in a white dress, she exuded an elegant grace, a gentle smile on her face. "Oh, you must be Frederick's wife, right?" "Hello, I'm an old acquaintance of his, Juliana Ashwood. Is he home right now?" Veronica stared at her for a moment, nodded, and stepped aside to let her in. Frederick happened to come out just then. Seeing her, his expression shifted slightly. Though joy flickered in his eyes, his voice remained cool. "What are you doing here?" Juliana lowered her gaze and pulled a file from her bag, handing it to him. Frederick, as you know, I came back to the country prepared to get a divorce. But my case is rather difficult, and no lawyer is willing to take it. Can you help me? Before she had even finished speaking, Frederick reached out and took the file. I can. With that, he called his law firm partner, instructing them to transfer all his current cases to someone else. He was going to focus exclusively on this divorce case. The person on the other end was stunned. Frederick, our firm specializes in criminal cases. Why are you suddenly taking on a divorce case? Besides, from what you've described, your client can't produce any strong evidence to prove an irretrievable breakdown of the marriage. The court is very likely to dismiss the divorce petition. I suggest you have your client contact a family law attorney. They specialize in this field and would be a better fit. And if you'll permit me to be blunt, you shouldn't risk your 100 win rate myth and lower your standing for a case that's highly likely to fail. His words were a clear attempt at dissuasion, his concern for reputation and profit undisguised. The call was on speakerphone, so Juliana could also understand the situation. Hearing this, she grew anxious. In that case, maybe we should forget it. I'll find another lawyer. Before she could finish, Frederick stated decisively, no need, I'll handle this case personally. You just focus on preparing for your concert tour and don't worry too much. Veronica, watering plants on the balcony, had seen and heard everything. Based on her experience with over 1,000 divorce cases, Juliana's chances of losing were as high as 80%. Frederick had never touched a divorce case before. He had zero relevant experience. Even with his prodigious talent, he would first have to familiarize himself with the relevant laws. That would be time-consuming. Moreover, this was an international divorce, involving the complex legal statutes of different states within the U.S., so, no matter how brilliant he was, winning this case would be incredibly difficult. A case so laborious, thankless, and likely to fail was something the pragmatic, rational Frederick of the past would never have taken on. The only reason he had agreed so resolutely was because the person wanting the divorce was Juliana Ashwood. She was his unforgettable first love, and that was all that mattered. Veronica looked away. For the next week, Frederick truly did set aside all his work, spending his days at home poring over law books and case files. The light in his study burned all night. Juliana came over every day, ostensibly to check on the case's progress. He knew her tastes, brewing coffee for her before she arrived. He took time to trim the stems of the flowers she brought as a thank-you gift and change their water. When she casually mentioned the study light was too dim, he had it replaced overnight. As for whether Veronica preferred tea or coffee, what flowers grew in their home, which light bulb was burnt out, or which drain was clogged, the Frederick of the past had never cared. Only when Juliana was present did he seem to shed the shell of the unapproachable legal genius and become a real, warm person. And this was a side of him Veronica had never seen before. She looked at this man who was so familiar yet so strange, laughed at herself, and said nothing. She simply and silently cleared out the miscellaneous items she wouldn't be taking with her. After throwing out the last box of clothes, she returned home to hear him on the phone again. Frederick, I'm really not good with divorce cases. Why don't you ask your old rival, Vivian? She's incredibly experienced. She's handled hundreds, if not thousands, of divorce cases, all victorious. She also has extensive experience with international divorce litigation. If you go to her, she can definitely give you effective advice. Hearing this, Frederick pondered for a long time. Perhaps because he was so desperate for Juliana to get her divorce, this incredibly proud man finally chose to have someone look up Vivian's contact information. Once he had the number, he typed in the digits and pressed the dial button. The next second, the phone in Veronica's pocket vibrated. She took it out and looked at the word hubby flashing on the screen. She didn't answer. The ringing sound from the unanswered call echoed through the living room via the speakerphone. After 8 consecutive calls with no answer, Frederick frowned slightly. Juliana handed him a cup of coffee, comforting him in a soft voice. Maybe Vivian is busy and missed the call. We can try contacting her again later. Frederick nodded, but as he hung up, he accidentally knocked over the coffee, soaking the documents. The tissues on the table were gone. Just as Juliana was about to get more, he called out to Veronica, telling her to bring a new pack. Veronica brought a pack over and saw the 8 missed calls on his phone screen. It was just a string of numbers, with no name attached. So, Frederick hadn't even saved her phone number. No wonder he hadn't realized the person he was trying to find was right beside him. She smiled silently, got up, and went into the kitchen to make herself a simple breakfast. When she came out with a sandwich, she saw him on the phone again. She still didn't answer. Frederick's patience wore thin. He stood up and headed for the study. She probably changed her number. I'll get someone to find the contact information for Stellar Law Firm in North City. Hearing this, Veronica's gaze froze. If he contacted her old firm with their gossipy nature, they would surely spill everything about her. And right now, she didn't want him to know. So she turned her attention to Juliana. Miss Ashwood, I happen to know a little about the issue you're trying to understand. In a California divorce proceeding, the plaintiff is required to provide. She briefly outlined the application of that particular law. Juliana didn't quite understand and quickly called Frederick out. Veronica repeated herself. Frederick understood, but the look he gave her was complicated. How do you know all this? Veronica took a sip of milk, her voice light. I graduated from S University's law school. 5 years ago, I came across a divorce case file that was highly similar to Miss Ashwood's. The plaintiff's petition was also dismissed due to an insufficient chain of evidence. That lawyer utilized certain provisions in international private law. This was a case Veronica had handled personally, so her analysis was fluent and effortless. Watching her speak with such confidence, Frederick felt for the first time that she was a world away from the doting housewife he had in his mind. For a moment, his heart stirred, and for the first time, he wanted to ask about her past. But now was not the time. He was on a tight schedule. Following her suggestion, he continued to prepare the lawsuit materials. With the problem solved, Veronica didn't meddle any further. She began to study cases from recent years, familiarizing herself with new and amended legal statutes in preparation for her comeback. Days passed. She was busy improving herself, paying no mind to the world outside. It wasn't until Frederick came to her that she learned Juliana had successfully divorced. Furthermore, to thank her for her help, Juliana wanted to invite Veronica to her piano recital. No, thank you. It was nothing. Veronica casually declined and went back to her book. Frederick walked over to her, wanting to persuade her further. He unintentionally saw the name, Vivian, written on the side of the book she was reading and froze. You like Vivian? Veronica followed his gaze and realized he had noticed her habit of marking her books. She subconsciously raised her hand to cover it and went along with his words, nodding. MMM. In the legal world, many people did see Vivian as an idol. Fearing he would ask more questions, she changed the subject. I was just thinking of going out for a walk. What time is the recital? I'll go change and we can head out. Fortunately, Frederick didn't press further. He nodded and went to wait for her in the car. When they arrived at the concert hall, Juliana's assistant came to escort them to the VIP section. Mr. Cromwell, so good to see you again for the past few years. Whenever Miss Ashwood has a performance, you're always there to support her, no matter where it is. You always bring a bouquet of tulips, her favorite. I used to think you were single, but I never expected you were married, and your wife is so gentle and beautiful. You're a lucky man. Veronica listened quietly. Only now did she realize that Frederick's frequent trips abroad weren't for business, but to see Juliana's performances. She lowered her head, thinking of how, on the night before each of his trips, she would meticulously pack his luggage, prepare his clothes, and even pack lots of pastries and snacks, afraid he wouldn't be used to the food. She had hoped for his early return, for his work to go smoothly, and for a safe journey. She never imagined that the only person on his mind was Juliana. She smiled, a bitter laugh at her own foolishness and sorrow. But it was all right. Soon, he would be free to openly pursue the love of his heart, and she would regain her freedom. In the VIP room, besides Veronica and Frederick, there was a couple with a young child. Once the performance began, everyone was immersed in the beautiful, crisp music. Even the 5-year-old child listened with rapt attention. After the first half of the program, there was a 20-minute intermission. The child, Daisy, unleashed her natural energy, bouncing around the room, her voice full of excitement. That lady is so amazing, she can play such a difficult piece so well. How does she do it? Mommy, can you tell me her story? The child's mother didn't know much, so she opened Google on the spot and began reading aloud. Veronica got up to use the restroom. When she returned, she heard Frederick's voice. The information on Google isn't entirely accurate. In fact, she comes from a family of musicians and started practicing the piano at the age of 2. She won first place in every competition she entered as a child, was admitted to F University's music department on a full scholarship, and was considered a once-in-a-century prodigy. Before she even graduated, she was discovered by that world-renowned piano master in Europe and became his final disciple. His voice was calm and light, yet filled with an admiration he couldn't hide. The little girl's eyes lit up. She tugged on his hand, shaking it. "Mister, how do you know so much about this lady? Do you like her?" Frederick's expression froze. He said nothing more. The child's mother sensed the awkwardness and quickly picked her up, gently scolding her. "Daisy, don't say such things. The mister is already married." Veronica listened in silence, her fingers unconsciously curling into a fist. So what if he was married? Love was love, and its absence was just as clear. Frederick never lied. In the face of the child's question, his silence was an answer in itself. After the second half of the performance, Juliana booked a restaurant, saying she wanted to properly thank Frederick and Veronica. Just as they reached the entrance, Frederick and Juliana ran into some old classmates. Not wanting to make Veronica wait, they had the owner show her to the private room first. The owner was very friendly and struck up a conversation with her. "You must be a friend of Mr. Cromwell and Miss Ashwood, right? They used to be regulars here. Don't be fooled by Mr. Cromwell's cold expression. He's so gentle with Miss Ashwood. Miss Ashwood loves crab, and he would peel it for her with his own hands. When she drank too much and insisted he carried her on his back for 4 hours down the mountain. But then Miss Ashwood went abroad, and only Mr. Cromwell came here. Every time, he would order a table full of Miss Ashwood's favorite dishes and sit alone until closing time. Now that Miss Ashwood is back, they should be getting married soon, right?" Hearing this, Veronica's lips twitched, her voice stiff. "Perhaps." Soon, Juliana and Frederick returned. As usual, he ordered a table full of dishes and handed the menu to the waiter. After the food arrived, he put on gloves, peeled a crab, and habitually went to place it in front of Juliana. She paused, glanced at Veronica, and reminded him, "This is Veronica's first time at this restaurant. Let her try it first." Frederick's hand froze mid-air, then changed course and placed the plate in front of Veronica. It was the first time since their marriage that he had taken care of her like this, and it was only because of Juliana. She looked at the neatly piled crab meat on the plate, her voice calm. "I'm allergic to seafood. I can't eat crab," Frederick frowned. "You're allergic to seafood? Then why do you often cook fish and shrimp?" "Because you like it." Silence fell in the room. Veronica finished the sentence in her heart. "And you never cared what I like." Seeing the atmosphere turn cold, Juliana quickly changed the subject to lighten the mood. Frederick went along with her, and the two of them started chatting on their own. Veronica said nothing, sitting like an invisible person, quietly eating her meal. As the waiter brought a fish soup, a pair of chasing children ran by and knocked over the cart. A large tureen of freshly made hot soup spilled directly toward Juliana and Veronica. In that critical moment, Frederick instinctively pulled Juliana into his arms. Veronica was drenched in the soup, enveloped in hot steam. Her skin turned crimson, and a large area of yellow blisters immediately formed, a shocking sight. A searing pain shot through her, and tears streamed down her face. Frederick's pupils constricted. Just as he was about to check on her, he heard Juliana cry out behind him. He immediately turned back, his voice filled with concern. "What's wrong?" Juliana's eyes reddened. "A little bit of the hot soup splashed on my fingertip. It hurts so much." Hearing this, his expression changed. He immediately swept her up into his arms and said to Veronica, "Go to the hospital yourself. Juliana's hands are for playing the piano. They can't afford any damage." Without waiting for Veronica's reply, he turned and quickly left, carrying Juliana. Veronica watched his retreating back, no longer able to hold back the tears. Covered in blisters, she went to the hospital alone. After her wounds were treated, Veronica spent the next few days recovering in the hospital. When the nurses came to do their rounds, they would occasionally chat about hospital gossip. I heard a pianist is staying in the VIP ward, just a tiny burn on her fingertip, but her boyfriend is so worried. He's called in so many specialists for consultations. He's with her for every dressing change and checkup, and he even feeds her personally, so afraid that any mishap might ruin her career. A few times on the night shift, I've seen him sitting by her bed, holding her hand, gently kissing the back of it. The look of devotion in his eyes, you just can't look away. I heard he's a brilliant lawyer and so handsome. He and the beautiful, gentle pianist are truly a match made in heaven. Veronica listened silently, her heart already numb, feeling nothing at all, because she was leaving soon. Because she had already let him go. So, no matter how much Frederick loved someone else, it had nothing to do with her anymore. 3 days later, Veronica completed her discharge procedures and prepared to go home. Frederick, however, was waiting for her at the entrance, a rare occurrence. He took her luggage from her. "I'm on leave today, no work for a change, I'll take you out." Veronica was stunned for a moment. In all their years of marriage, Frederick had never once suggested they go on a date. Even when she had planned an entire itinerary, put on exquisite makeup, and chosen a restaurant to his liking, Frederick would always decline with excuses like being busy with work or having to go on a business trip. She didn't know why he suddenly suggested going out today. Was it a whim, or did he feel guilty for abandoning her at the restaurant and want to make it up to her? Could a person like him even feel guilt? Frederick, oblivious to her emotional turmoil, took her to a shopping mall and into a jewelry store. He immediately picked out several diamond necklaces and had the salesperson take them out for Veronica to try on, one by one. The salesperson, beaming, took them out and helped the customer try them on, showering her with praise. "This gentleman has excellent taste. This Heart of the Ocean is our signature piece. It looks absolutely perfect on you, madam. It truly complements your aura. You are such a lucky woman to have a husband who spoils you so, even picking out jewelry for you himself. Your relationship must be very harmonious." Hearing their compliments, Frederick maintained his usual cold demeanor. Veronica looked down at the necklace around her neck. In the past, she would have been delighted to receive these gifts, but now she just felt it was a waste to buy them. "You don't have to buy them for me. I don't really like jewelry." But Frederick seemed not to hear her. After choosing one necklace, he directly took out his card and paid. Only after the salesperson had it packaged and delivered did he turn to look at her, his tone light. "I know you don't like it. It's just that today is Juliana's birthday. This is my gift to her. I was afraid of making a mistake, so I asked you to help me try it on." Hearing this, Veronica's heart jolted violently. So he had taken her out today not out of guilt, but merely to pick the perfect gift for Juliana. From beginning to end, she was just a tool. Next, Frederick said that Juliana had also invited her to the birthday party and drove her directly to a private club. Just as they pushed open the door to the private room and saw Juliana, a barely perceptible smile appeared on Frederick's usually cold face. He handed her the gift and wished her a happy birthday. Juliana's friends crowded around, eagerly unwrapping the present. When they saw the magnificent, sparkling gemstone necklace, several of the girls shrieked with excitement. Giving such an expensive necklace without even blinking Frederick, our big man on campus, you're just too doting, truly worthy of being the #1 campus power couple on F University's OTP list. The group praised him one after another, and many old classmates began to reminisce about their youthful days, discussing them with great enthusiasm. "Do you guys remember when Juliana sprained her ankle? Our big man on campus carried her to class and study sessions every day. He got teased by so many students who saw them. That was the first time I ever saw our usually cool campus heartthrob get shy, and there was that time it was popular for guys to knit scarves for their girlfriends. We all got one and dropped a few hints." Frederick stayed up for a week following a tutorial and knitted one for Juliana. What I remember most vividly is when some guy tried to pursue Juliana and, after being rejected, got angry and started spreading vicious rumors about her. Frederick, a top law student, broke the law for the first time for Juliana's sake. He went and got into a fight with that guy. It was so satisfying, the group of classmates grew more and more excited, but Frederick fell silent. Juliana's expression also dimmed and she cut them off. "All right, the past is the past. Stop talking nonsense. Frederick's wife is here today, let's not give her the wrong idea." In an instant, all eyes in the room fell on Veronica. Embarrassment showed on their faces, and they quickly quieted down. But some of Juliana's roommates were not convinced and couldn't help but say, "Frederick, our big man on campus, what does your wife do? To be noticed by a prodigy like you, she must be famous in her own right. Which field is she a master in?" Frederick's tone was flat. "She doesn't have a job, she's just a plain housewife." At this news, the room erupted in a low buzz. Many people, in unison, shot her looks of disdain and contempt, whispering amongst themselves. Frederick's ex-girlfriend was Juliana, a graduate of a prestigious university, an internationally acclaimed genius pianist. Frederick himself is now a leader in his industry. How did his taste in partners drop to such an ordinary standard after just a few years? To put it nicely, she's a housewife. In reality, she's just a sponger who reaps without sowing, has achieved nothing, and just wants to live the life of a rich man's wife. Standing alone in a corner, Veronica listened to these taunts and couldn't help but think back to her time as a force to be reckoned within the professional world. Back then, her commission for a single case was in the millions of dollars. Everywhere she went, people made way for her. There was a waiting list to hire her for a lawsuit. She willingly returned to domestic life for love, only to become a freeloader in everyone's eyes. She curved her lips into a smile, finding it all incredibly ironic. Her sacrifice had moved no one but herself. Frederick also heard the whispers, but he didn't explain, merely changing the subject. "Everyone's here. Juliana, didn't you say you wanted to play a game?" The room quickly became lively again. Someone brought out a game wheel, and they started playing. Frederick's entire focus was on Juliana. He paid little attention to the game and lost the first round. The penalty he drew was to have his phone's photo album and memos inspected. His classmates swarmed him and took his phone. The moment they opened the photo album, they saw tens of thousands of pictures he had saved. Every single one was related to Juliana. Her cute ID photo from her teenage years, photos of them together when they were dating, pictures she posted on her social media feed after they broke up. Scrolling through, it was all Juliana. They didn't dare to scroll any further and quickly went to his memos. The dense text meticulously recorded Juliana's likes and dislikes, sweet memories from their relationship, and his unvented pain and longing after their breakup. The undisguised love and agony between the lines made everyone's heart ache a little, their gazes shifting between Frederick and Juliana. Juliana couldn't help but look at the drunken Frederick, an indescribable pain clouding her features. A strange, oppressive atmosphere settled over the room. Having witnessed all of this, Veronica's heart was in turmoil. She could no longer pretend to be unaffected. She hastily got up and went to the restroom, splashing cold water on her face. When she returned, she had just reached the door when she saw that Frederick had lost again. This time, the penalty he drew was to call the love of his life and say something from the heart. He seemed drunk, but he understood the rules of the game. He picked up his phone and pressed a few keys. A moment later, Juliana's ringtone sounded in the room. As soon as she answered, Frederick stared straight at her and tugged at the corner of his lips. "At 18, I had nothing, but with the love of my life by my side, I felt like I had the world. Now I seem to have everything, but I've lost the love of my youth. I'm surrounded by emptiness, and I have nothing." Watching him pour out his naked love for Juliana in front of everyone, Veronica couldn't help but laugh. But as she laughed, tears welled up in her eyes. She tilted her head back, refusing to let the tears fall, and silently turned and left. After returning home, Veronica began to sort out the assets to be divided in the divorce. Frederick had earned a lot of money during their marriage, which was considered joint marital property. According to the law, she was entitled to half. However, she didn't want the houses or cars, only taking the money, and decided to donate all of it to charity. During this time, Frederick never came back, and she didn't know what he was busy with. It was Juliana who called her, wanting to meet and talk. The two met at a coffee shop and exchanged a few pleasantries. Juliana apologized for what had happened at the birthday party. "Miss Vance, my friends had too much to drink that day and weren't careful with their words. If they offended you in any way, I hope you can be the bigger person." Veronica pulled at her lips. "There won't be a next time. I'm leaving South City soon, and I won't dwell on such trivial matters." Hearing that she was leaving, Juliana showed a look of surprise. "Enjoy, you're leaving? Is it because of me? I'm sorry, Frederick and I were together before, but that was a long time ago. Veronica saw the joy in her eyes and looked directly at her. Miss Ashwood, may I ask if you've really let go? Even if you have, Frederick has never let go of you. He listens to your piano music through his headphones to fall asleep every night. Every time he gets drunk, he calls out your name. On your birthday every year, he buys a cake and sits in his study until late at night. Veronica paused, recounting these past events one by one, and suddenly felt incredibly tired. No matter how hard I tried, I could never get into his heart. It proves that sincerity doesn't always beget sincerity. I'm tired, so I've decided to give up on this marriage. Juliana was stunned, and it took her a while to speak again to confirm. So, you're really going to divorce Frederick? Yes, the divorce agreement is already signed. Tomorrow is the last day of the cooling-off period. From now on, everything related to Frederick Cromwell has nothing to do with me. After saying this forthrightly, Veronica didn't look at her expression again, picking up her bag to leave. But as she opened the door, a crowd of rabid fans holding signs with Juliana's name suddenly surged forward, seemingly trying to rush in. Her expression changed, and she quickly locked the door. But someone kept kicking the door from the outside. The two of them were trapped inside, unable to get out. Juliana hadn't expected to encounter so many crazed fans at this time. Helpless, she could only call Frederick and tell him what was happening, asking him to come and help. He arrived quickly, squeezing through the sea of people to the private room's door, and was let in during the chaos. He had come in a hurry, his usually impeccably ironed suit now wrinkled. Juliana, there are too many fans blocking the way. The only way out now is for you and Veronica to switch coats. I'll get you out of here first. Juliana, having experienced being mobbed by obsessive fans before, immediately looked at Veronica with pleading eyes. Veronica's heart felt desolate. He had come up with a good plan, a perfect one to protect his one that got away. But had he ever considered what would happen to her? She gave a self-mocking tug of her lips, and without saying a word, took off her coat. After they swapped clothes, Frederick left with Juliana without even a second glance at Veronica. The door to the room opened for a moment and was quickly locked again by Veronica. Wearing Juliana's clothes, she quietly listened to the increasingly raucous shouts from outside. After a long wait, the fans outside gradually lost their patience and kicked the door open. A swarm of people crowded around Veronica, pulling, dragging, and shoving her. Her hat, mask, and sunglasses were quickly torn off. Upon discovering she wasn't Juliana, the fans' elation turned to the rage of being deceived. They pushed Veronica to the ground, cursing her viciously. Countless feet trampled and stepped on her, leaving a patchwork of blue and purple bruises. In the chaos, she barely managed to protect her vital organs, her entire body racked with excruciating pain. In the turmoil, the oxygen in her chest slowly depleted. Just as she felt she was about to suffocate, she heard indignant screams from a distance. Juliana left in a car half an hour ago. We missed her. Realizing Juliana wasn't there, the crowd receded like a tide. Only Veronica was left, disheveled and her heart a dead void. She struggled to her feet, enduring the pain to go to the hospital and have her wounds treated. Only one thought remained in her mind. She had to leave this city to completely sever ties with Frederick Cromwell. After returning home, Veronica booked a flight to North City. The airline called to confirm, and she answered, "Yes, I bought a ticket to North City for 10 in the morning." Just as she finished speaking, Frederick pushed the door open and, hearing her, asked, 10 in the morning. "Where are you going?" Veronica's gaze fixed. She hung up the phone, her tone flat. "To see some old friends." "Friends?" Frederick nodded indifferently, not pressing further. He took off his coat and, seeing the injuries on her, was taken aback. "You're hurt." "I'm sorry, I didn't expect those fans to be so crazy." "Didn't expect? Or didn't care?" Veronica smiled but said nothing. Seeing her silence, Frederick changed the subject. "It makes sense. You've been at home for too long. In the future, if you have a chance to meet up with friends, you should go out more, see the world a bit." As he finished, a message from Juliana happened to come in. Frederick took his phone and went into the study. Watching the slowly closing door, Veronica nodded gently. After tomorrow, she would indeed go out and see the world. She wouldn't trap herself in a cocoon anymore. The next day, Veronica woke up early. She took the divorce agreement and collected her divorce certificate. Just as she got home, she ran into Frederick at the door, who was about to leave. Wanting to tell him about the divorce, she called out to him, "Do you have a minute? I have something important to tell you." Frederick glanced at his watch, his tone a bit rushed. "If it's something important, we can talk when I get back tonight. I have to go out now." "In that case, there's no need to talk. This is something for you. As she spoke, Veronica took out the divorce certificate and handed it to him. Frederick was looking down at his phone, replying to a message from Juliana. He took it absent-mindedly and, without a glance, tossed it into the drawer of the entryway cabinet. He picked up his car keys and turned to leave, leaving only one sentence behind. "Got it. Aren't you going to a gathering with friends? Have fun and come back early." No, this time she wouldn't be coming back. Veronica watched him leave for the last time, answering him in her heart. She went back to the bedroom, took her luggage, and walked out of the villa. The moment the main gate closed, she took a deep breath. The shackles of 3 years were finally broken. "Goodbye, Frederick Cromwell. The next time we meet, I will no longer be your wife. I will be your mortal enemy, Vivian." Frederick stood downstairs from Juliana's apartment, a velvet box in his hand. He opened it. Inside was the diamond necklace he had asked Veronica to help him choose. The sun was bright today, making the diamond pendant sparkle. He stared at the pendant for a few seconds, suddenly remembering Veronica's expression from anticipation to disappointment, then to indifference when he had said, "I know you don't like it, so I asked you to help me try it on." He clenched the box, his knuckles turning slightly white. "I'll buy her one when I get back." He rang the doorbell. When Juliana opened the door, her eyes lit up, her smile bright as if she had been expecting him. She wore a light-colored dress, her hair loosely tied up, looking gentle and harmless. "Frederick," she blinked, "what brings you here?" Frederick was silent for a moment, finally just saying, "Didn't I say I'd help you find inspiration today?" Juliana, oblivious to his thoughts, smiled and nodded. "I almost forgot. Wait for me, I'll change my shoes." Frederick gripped the steering wheel, Juliana's excited voice in his ear. In the past, he would have patiently humored her, but today, for some reason, his heart felt heavy, making it hard to breathe. They went to the botanical garden on the outskirts of the city. The early autumn sunlight dappled through the leaves onto the ground. Juliana walked beside him, occasionally pointing to a plant and explaining it softly. She had minored in horticulture in college and spoke about these things with authority. Frederick gradually relaxed. At noon, they ate at the garden's restaurant. Juliana specially ordered his favorite dishes and a bottle of red wine. "You're in a bad mood today," she said, pouring him wine, her tone certain. Frederick looked up at her. "Is it that obvious? When you frown, there's a very faint line right here." She reached out, her fingertip stopping an inch from his brow, then casually retracted it. "It's been like that since college." He was slightly taken aback. After Juliana said this, his first thought was that Veronica had said the same thing. Frederick's hand tightened slightly, the fork and knife scraping softly against the plate. Juliana seemed not to hear. In the afternoon, they watched a movie. In the darkness, Juliana's hand quietly covered his. Her fingertips were cool. Frederick hesitated for a moment before gently squeezing back. The necklace seemed to have absorbed his body heat, but he never found the right moment to give it to her. When the movie ended, it was already dark. Juliana suggested going to a nearby bar for a drink. Frederick, still somewhat dazed, unconsciously agreed. In the bar's restroom, he splashed cold water on his face. When he looked up, the reflection in the mirror showed a man with dark, inscrutable eyes. What was he doing? Today was a rare date with Juliana, yet his mind was filled with images of Veronica. He was going crazy. He dried his face and was about to push the door open when he heard Juliana's voice not far away. She seemed to be on the phone, her tone a world away from the gentle one she'd used earlier. "Don't worry, he doesn't know a thing. Those fans did a good job. I want Veronica to get a taste of being cyberbullied. Yes, keep fanning the flames. It would be best if she's too scared to even leave her house." Frederick's body went rigid, the blood in his veins turning to ice. As he walked closer, Juliana had just hung up. Seeing him, her expression flickered with panic, but she quickly composed herself. "Have you been waiting long?" she asked with a smile. Frederick stared at her, his voice low. "The fans who attacked Veronica, you arranged them?" Juliana's smile didn't falter. "Frederick, what are you talking about?" I heard you. He took a step forward, the pressure around him dropping to a terrifying low. Those obsessive fans, you arranged them. Not only that, you're trying to get people to cyberbully her. But Veronica has no grudge against you. She even helped with your case. Why would you do this? Juliana's face changed, and then she put on a wronged expression. Frederick, did you mishear? How could I do something like that? Enough. He cut her off, pulling the necklace from his pocket and placing it on the table. We both need to cool down. Juliana looked at him in disbelief. Frederick, how can you not believe me? We've known each other for so long. As she spoke, she tried to grab his hand. Frederick turned and walked away. When he got home, the apartment was dark. He turned on the light and noticed Veronica's slippers were neatly placed by the door. Her coat wasn't on the rack. She wasn't back yet. Frederick stood in the empty living room, suddenly feeling exhausted. He turned off his phone, collapsed onto the sofa, and closed his eyes. On her first day back in North City, Veronica went straight to her old employer Stellar law firm. The moment she pushed open the firm's doors, all eyes were on her. Familiar faces showed expressions of shock. Someone even dropped their coffee cup. Vivian? Charles Preston practically ran over, his voice trembling. You're really back? You disappeared after that phone call. I really thought I was dreaming. Veronica smiled slightly, her gaze calm but sharp. I've been silent for 3 years. It's time I came back. She gave herself no time to ease in, immediately taking on a thorny international business dispute. A domestic tech company was facing a hostile takeover by foreign capital, involving a dispute over billions in assets. The opposing side had hired a top-tier international legal team, and no one in the country dared to take the case. But she signed the retainer agreement without hesitation. The hearing is in 3 days. She closed the file, her tone casual but unchallengeable. That's enough for me. On the day of the trial, the opposing legal team was full of confidence, believing that a lawyer who had disappeared for 3 years was no longer a threat. However, the moment Veronica began to speak, the entire courtroom fell silent. Her logic was tight, her chain of evidence flawless. She had even anticipated all of the opposition's arguments. Whenever they tried to rebut, she precisely targeted their loopholes and delivered a fatal blow. According to Article 37 of the International Commercial Code, the contract provided by your party contains clear fraudulent clauses, and your client's representative deliberately concealed key information during the signing. Her voice wasn't loud, but every word was like a blade. This is no longer just a business dispute. This is financial fraud. The opposing counsel's face turned pale, and the judge's expression grew serious. In the end, Veronica won a complete victory. On her first day back, she silenced all doubts and rumors with her undeniable professional prowess. As she stepped out of the courthouse, the media swarmed her. Under the barrage of camera flashes, she stood on the courthouse steps, her face calm, her words firm, leaving them with just one line. Yes, Vivian is back. And this time, I won't back down. Meanwhile, in South City, when Frederick returned home the next day, he habitually called out, Veronica? No one answered. Why isn't she back yet? He frowned, his brow furrowed with irritation. Walking to the entryway, he suddenly noticed a dark red booklet in the open drawer. He picked it up and opened it, a divorce certificate. His pupils contracted sharply. His fingers tightened unconsciously, wrinkling the paper. When? He immediately took out his phone and dialed Veronica's number, only to be met with a cold, automated voice. The user you have dialed is temporarily unavailable. He dialed again, but it was still the same indifferent mechanical voice. He scoured his contacts, trying to reach Veronica's friends, only to realize he didn't just lack their numbers, he hadn't even saved hers. He opened his messaging app. Where are you? A bright red exclamation mark stared back at him. It finally dawned on him. For the past 3 years, he had never once initiated contact with her. All their conversations were started by Veronica or were his curt, one-line messages, and now she had completely disappeared. He had no way to contact Veronica. Just as Frederick's mind descended into chaos, Juliana's call came through. Frederick, I heard, you and Miss Vance got divorced. Her voice was still gentle, but laced with a probing tone. Frederick was silent for a moment before letting out a low mmm. Juliana seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, her tone becoming noticeably lighter. Actually, after I came back, I've been wanting to tell you. The truth is, all these years, I've never forgotten you." She paused, her voice tinged with shyness. "If you're willing, we can start over." Frederick froze. He once thought that this was the sentence he most wanted to hear in his life. But now, with the divorce certificate beside him and the house plunged into darkness, all he could think of was Veronica. He saw her in a warm, colored apron, making soup for him in the kitchen. He saw her organizing his files in the study. He heard her nagging him to put on more clothes. He blinked, and the memories dispersed. "Frederick, are you still listening?" "Juliana, I'm sorry. I'm not in the mood to talk about this right now." That was all he could manage. That night, Frederick sat in his study, the screen of his laptop displaying the latest news from the Bar Association. Frederick's eyes were glazed over, his gaze fixed on some point in the empty space, lost in thought. His hand rested on the mouse, motionless for a long time. Suddenly, a news notification popped up shocking. Queen of the courtroom, Vivian, missing for 3 years, makes a high-profile comeback. Crushing an international legal team in her first battle, he clicked on the news. The first thing he saw was a photo from the courtroom. Frederick's breath caught in his throat. That face, it was Veronica. His fingers uncontrollably zoomed in on the photo, his eyes glued to the familiar yet strange face. What's going on? Vivian is Veronica, but she's just a housewife, isn't she? His mind went completely blank and he mumbled, "Impossible." Frederick's fingers hovered over the screen. The woman in the photo, with eyes as sharp as daggers, gradually merged with the memory of the figure who would bow her head while making soup. He suddenly remembered a late night when Veronica was curled up on the sofa, reading a copy of international commercial law. The memory grew clearer. The name Vivian was written in the corner of the book's title page. He had thought it was just a book she had borrowed, or something she had idly scribbled. Frederick had never once considered that Veronica was Vivian. But Veronica had analyzed Juliana's divorce case for him, her words precise and her grasp of past cases and relevant legal statutes effortless. He had seen her poring over stacks of thick law tomes, each one marked with Vivian in the corner. She had even mentioned a cross-border divorce case from 5 years ago, and he had never dug deeper. She had been right in front of him all along, but he had never truly seen her. He had never truly seen the person he shared a bed with. After a moment of stupor, Frederick shot to his feet, grabbed his car keys, and bolted out the door. He had to find her. He had to find her and demand an explanation, but just as he left, his phone rang. It was his law firm partner. "Frederick, did you see the news? Vivian's back and she's Veronica Vance, my God, and we were just telling you to contact her for help." Frederick's fingers clenched the steering wheel, his knuckles white. "I know," he said, his voice hoarse. "I'm going to find her now." The person on the other end was stunned. "Where are you going to find her? Isn't she now?" "North City." He hung up, slammed on the accelerator, and the car shot forward like an arrow released from a bow. It was late at night when Frederick arrived in North City. He didn't go to a hotel but drove directly to Stellar Law Firm. By the time he arrived, the building was dark. He stood below, looking up at the blacked-out windows as if he could somehow catch a glimpse of her. Veronica Vance, Vivian. The two names intertwined in his mind, like a dull knife slowly slicing away at his sanity. He called an old classmate from the North City Bar Association, his voice hoarse. "Help me check something. Vivian's real identity." The person on the other end sounded surprised. "You don't know? Vivian is Veronica Vance. She suddenly retired for some reason 3 years ago and just made a comeback." "Wait, Veronica Vance? Isn't that your wife?" The voice on the phone was filled with confusion and shock, while Frederick's fingers nearly crushed his phone. So the whole world knew, only he had been kept in the dark. Back at the hotel, Frederick sat on the edge of the bed, his head splitting. He scrolled through the few photos he had of Veronica on his phone. Most were of her standing quietly in a corner or her back as she cooked. He had never taken a proper picture of her face, just as he had never seriously tried to understand her. Memories flooded back like a tidal wave. She had been reading law books in his study, the page margins marked with Vivian, and he had just frowned and dismissed it as her casually browsing. When she analyzed Juliana's divorce case, her logic was shockingly clear, and he had just thought she was speaking off the cuff. She had even casually mentioned during a dinner, "I handled a similar case before," and he hadn't been listening at all. She had never deliberately hidden it. He had just never paid attention. He suddenly felt a surge of anger at Veronica for not telling him, and anger at himself for being so deaf to it all. Frederick violently threw his phone against the wall. The sound of the screen shattering was piercingly loud in the silent room. The next day, at the North City Intermediate Court, Veronica had just finished a trial and was walking out of the courtroom with a steady gait. She wore a sharply tailored black suit, her long hair pulled back, her eyes as sharp as knives. She was a world away from the docile Mrs. Cromwell of the past 3 years. "Veronica Vance," a familiar voice called from behind. Her steps faltered, but she didn't turn around. Frederick strode up, grabbing her wrist with a force that made her wince slightly. "Why didn't you tell me you were Vivian?" His voice was low and hoarse, laced with suppressed rage. Veronica slowly turned, her gaze calm as she looked at him, a cold smile touching her lips. "Why didn't I tell you? Attorney Cromwell, in 3 years of marriage, did you ever care? You ignored me, never once asked, and now you're questioning me for hiding it?" Frederick's breath hitched. Her gaze was too cold, as if she were looking at a stranger. The courthouse corridor was bustling, and many lawyers and reporters had already noticed their confrontation, quietly stopping to watch. Veronica gently pulled her hand away, adjusted her cuff, and said indifferently, "Attorney Cromwell, please have some self-respect. We are merely colleagues now, and in the future we may be opponents." She raised her eyes slightly, her gaze like ice. "And the next time we meet, it will be in court." With that, she turned and walked away, her back ramrod straight, without a trace of lingering. Frederick stood frozen, his fingers clenching and unclenching. They were husband and wife. He had never imagined that one day they would be like strangers or even opponents. But the image of the divorce certificate suddenly flashed in his mind, stopping him from chasing after her. Back in his hotel room, Frederick collapsed onto the carpet, utterly drained. His phone was vibrating madly. Juliana had sent over 20 messages. The last one was a voice note. He played it and her tearful voice came through. "Frederick, I went to find you, but you weren't there. You went to find her, didn't you? You clearly said. You didn't love her at all." Frederick closed his eyes. For some reason, hearing Juliana's crying only filled him with irritation. He simply turned off his phone. He walked to the window and looked out at the North City nightscape, suddenly remembering a time 3 years ago. Veronica had just married him and had timidly asked, "Do you like North City? I grew up here." He had replied coldly, "South City is better." From then on, she never mentioned her hometown again. The next day, the headlines of major legal publications read, "Shocking South City's undefeated myth, Frederick Cromwell and North City's Queen of the Courtroom Vivian were married." The accompanying photo was of their confrontation in the courthouse corridor. Veronica, cold as ice. Frederick, with a complex expression. The news sent the entire legal community into an uproar. So Vivian retired for 3 years to be a housewife for Frederick Cromwell? Is Frederick Cromwell blind? He married the queen of the courtroom and didn't even know? Rumor has it, not confirmed. "I heard his first love is that pianist Juliana Ashwood. Could Vivian have been a substitute?" Public opinion exploded, overwhelmingly mocking Frederick. Veronica, however, never responded. Late that night, Frederick sat alone in a bar, downing glass after glass of hard liquor. The bartender couldn't help but advise, "Sir, you've had too much." He paid no attention, until, in a drunken haze, he seemed to see Veronica sitting across from him, still with that gentle demeanor, asking softly, "Frederick, was work tiring today?" He reached out to grab her but only grasped at air. Without realizing it, he had already lost the most precious person. Outside the North City High Court, the media's long-lensed cameras were already set up. This was a high-profile commercial murder case. Walter Simmons, a renowned entrepreneur, was accused of murdering a competitor. The chain of evidence was complete, but the defendant had hired South City's undefeated myth, Frederick Cromwell, for his defense. The victim's family, in turn, had retained the recently returned Queen of the Courtroom, Vivian. The first showdown between the two top lawyers. The courtroom was packed. The trial began. Veronica, as the prosecutor's representative, made the opening statement. She stood in the center of the courtroom, her black suit accentuating her formidable presence, her voice clear and sharp. On the night of the incident, the defendant, Walter Simmons, called the deceased 3 times. Call records show that after the final call, the deceased's phone signal disappeared. The body was discovered the following morning. She clicked a remote, and the projector screen displayed the defendant's vehicle data at the time of the incident. His car was in the vicinity of the deceased's neighborhood. More importantly, she paused for a second, her gaze sweeping over the jury. We found the defendant's DNA under the deceased's fingernails. A murmur went through the courtroom. Frederick's brow furrowed. This case was trickier than he had anticipated. When it was Frederick's turn for cross-examination, he rose and approached the witness stand, his tone steady. The vehicle data only proves that my client passed through the area. It does not prove that he actually entered the deceased's home. He turned to the jury, continuing, as for the DNA, my client and the deceased were business partners. It is normal for them to have had physical contact previously. His logic was sound, his defense powerful. It should have been an evenly matched battle until his gaze unintentionally swept over Veronica. She was looking down, flipping through documents, her profile severe, her eyelashes casting a small shadow under the light. In that instant, Frederick was hit with a sense of déjà vu, seeing the Veronica of 3 years ago. She used to sit just like that at the dining table, under the warm yellow light, quietly waiting for him to come home for dinner. And he always ignored her. "Attorney Cromwell," the judge prompted, "please continue your questioning." Frederick snapped back to reality, having momentarily forgotten his next question. Veronica looked up, her eyes meeting his, a barely perceptible, cold smile playing on her lips. During the final closing arguments, Veronica stood up and slowly walked toward the jury. The defendant claims he had a good relationship with the deceased. However, she took out a USB drive and played a recording. This is a threat the defendant made to the deceased at a private club 1 week before the incident. There were no cameras inside the room, but a security camera near the entrance to their private suite captured a single sentence as a waiter pushed the door open. In the recording, Walter Simmons's voice was filled with hatred. "Sue you if you dare to steal my project again. I'll make sure you don't even have a body left for burial." The jury members' faces changed. Walter Simmons never expected someone to open the door. He tried to bribe and threaten the waiter to keep quiet, and he didn't think the hallway camera could prove anything. "Just having a drink together," he'd say, but the victim probably never expected that the drink he was having was his last. Veronica pressed her advantage. "The chain of evidence is complete, the motive is clear. This is enough to prove it was a premeditated murder, not an accident." She turned to face Frederick, her tone soft but her eyes sharp. "Attorney Cromwell, the law does not bend the truth for a lawyer's reputation." That sentence, like a hammer, shattered the lofty tower he stood upon. When the judge announced a recess for deliberation, Frederick sat at the defense table, his fingers unconsciously tapping the surface. He had never been distracted in court before, but today his mind was filled with Veronica. The way she calmly presented her case, the sharpness with which she refuted him, and the way she looked at him, with such cold eyes. Half an hour later, the judge delivered the verdict. The defendant, Walter Simmons, is found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison. Frederick Cromwell had lost. The media erupted instantly. Flashes went off like crazy, and headlines quickly shot to the top of social media trends. Myth shattered: Frederick Cromwell's first defeat. Loses to ex-wife Vivian first battle. First loss: will Frederick Cromwell's confidence be shaken? In South City, Juliana saw the news and violently threw her phone against the wall. "Veronica Vance, what right do you have?" She clenched her fists so tightly her nails dug into her palms. She couldn't believe her eyes. Frederick had actually chased Veronica all the way to North City and even lost a case because of it. She would not allow it that afternoon. Juliana secretly contacted several tabloid media outlets and anonymously leaked a story. Vivian slept her way into marrying Frederick Cromwell. She retired for 3 years because he got tired of her, and now she's back for revenge. The revelation caused a massive uproar online. Vivian slept her way up. Vivian's revenge, come back the truth behind Frederick Vivian's marriage. These topics instantly dominated the trending charts. The phone lines at Veronica's law firm were ringing off the hook, and the entrance was swarmed with reporters, all determined to dig up some dirt. "Attorney Vivian, is it true that you used improper means to marry Frederick Cromwell? Is your high-profile comeback an act of revenge against him? Is your marriage to Frederick Cromwell still valid?" Will you choose to divorce him? Veronica walked through the crowd with a blank expression until one reporter asked sharply, "Is it true that Frederick Cromwell never loved you?" Her steps finally halted. Slowly turning, she looked into the camera, her voice calm but resonant. "First, the various rumors online are all false. Second, my marriage to Frederick Cromwell is over. I ask you all to focus on the cases, not on gossip." With that, she walked away, her back as straight as a pine tree. That night, Frederick saw the trending topics, and rage welled up inside him. He quickly ran through a list of rivals in his mind, but none of them knew the details of his marriage. He dialed Juliana's number directly, his voice terrifyingly cold. "You leaked the story." His tone was certain, cutting off all the excuses Juliana had prepared. Juliana defensively argued, "I was just telling the truth." "The truth?" he sneered. "The truth is that 3 years ago, I was drunk and mistook her for someone else. I proposed marriage to compensate her. She was never at fault for any of it." There was a moment of silence on the other end, and then Juliana burst into tears. "You've fallen in love with her, haven't you?" Frederick didn't answer. He just hung up. He stood by the hotel's floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the North City nightscape, and suddenly remembered Veronica in court today, confident and dazzling. She was no longer the Veronica who would always wait for him to come home. The recent rumors were escalating. Charles Preston drew the curtains, shutting out the prying eyes from outside. The office fell quiet, with only the faint sound of keyboard tapping. "These people are relentless. They'd stick a camera down your throat if they could. I'm sorry. My personal life has affected the firm." Charles waved his hand. "Don't say that. I should be thanking you for coming back. But what's your next move? You can't just keep dodging them." Veronica turned to the window, her sharp gaze seeming to pierce through the thick curtains to the reporters below. "Why should I have to dodge?" The next day, media outlets flocked to the North City International Conference Center. Veronica, dressed in a sharp white suit, stood at the podium, her calm gaze sweeping over the flashing cameras below. She hadn't hired a PR team, prepared a script, or even brought a colleague. This press conference was a battle she would fight for herself. "I will now address the recent rumors," she began, her voice clear and cold. "First, my marriage to Frederick Cromwell was never the result of sleeping my way up." She clicked a remote, and the large screen lit up. The first image was a security camera, still from a hotel 3 years ago, showing a drunk Frederick being supported by her into an elevator. The second was a hospital report, confirming that it had been her first time. The third was a text message from Frederick after he woke up. "I'll take responsibility. Let's get married." The room erupted. Veronica continued, "In our 3 years of marriage, Frederick Cromwell did not fulfill his responsibilities as a partner. Emotional neglect, disregard, and even abandoning me on the highway when I was unwell for his first love, leaving me at a restaurant when I was unable to move due to severe burns." As Veronica spoke, the screen switched to an emergency room record. Patient Veronica Vance, multiple second-degree burns across the body. The next photo showed her back covered in shocking blisters. And what was Frederick Cromwell doing at that time? The final photo appeared Frederick, carrying a red-fingered Juliana, rushing out of the restaurant. His eyes were filled with anxiety, his entire focus on the person in his arms. To an unknowing observer, it would seem Juliana was his gravely injured wife. The press conference was not only for major media outlets, but was also being live-streamed online. The story involved 3 people, 2 top-tier elite lawyers, and a world-renowned pianist. The sheer volume of information and the complexity of the relationships instantly caused an internet meltdown. Frederick Cromwell scumbag Juliana, ASHWOOD, 2, faced manipulator VIVIA and abandoned, and other hashtags dominated the trending lists. Netizens were furious. "I'm sick Frederick Cromwell abandoned his severely injured wife for a two-faced schemer. Who is Juliana Ashwood kidding with that damsel in distress act? A slightly red fingertip is enough to steal someone's husband. Vivian retired for 3 years to be his maid, and he didn't even know she was a lawyer. He just chose not to say anything. Don't change the subject, she didn't do anything wrong. Besides, even if Vivian didn't say anything, doesn't Frederick have a mouth?" Juliana's reputation plummeted. It wasn't just about her being a manipulator. Netizens had already pieced together a timeline, proving she and Frederick had been in frequent contact before his divorce from Veronica was finalized. Juliana, ASHWOOD homewrecker Juliana, ASHWOOD, INTERFERES in marriage, and other related tags soared in popularity. The official website for her piano tour was flooded by angry netizens, and the organizers hastily announced the cancellation of all performances. In the conference room of the South City law firm, all the partners watched the live broadcast with grim faces. "Frederick, do you realize how much this will damage the firm's reputation?" The managing partner nodded repeatedly, laughing out of sheer anger, before slamming a file on the table. As of 10 minutes ago, 3 major clients have already terminated their contracts. Frederick sat motionless, his eyes glued to Veronica's face on the screen. When she recounted the ways he had hurt her, her tone was so calm it was as if she were telling someone else's story. He had hurt her that deeply. In Juliana's apartment, her phone on the coffee table vibrated relentlessly, the screen lighting up and going dark in a continuous loop. She stared at the caller ID. "Frederick," but the call remained unanswered. "Answer the phone." "Answer it." She grabbed the phone, her fingertips trembling, redialing again and again. The only response was a cold, mechanical voice. "The number you have dialed is currently unavailable." Finally, the phone slipped and fell onto the carpet, the cracked screen resembling a spiderweb trapping her within. Her agent's call came through, his furious roar exploding from the speaker. "Are you insane? Picking a fight with Vivian? The entire internet is cursing you. The tour is canceled. All your endorsements are gone. Even the sponsors are pulling out. Are you happy now?" Juliana's breathing grew ragged, her nails digging deep into her palms, but the pain couldn't suppress the surging hatred. She was the one who said she would divorce Frederick, but she's still clinging to him. "I did nothing wrong." She grabbed a vase from the coffee table and hurled it against the wall, glass shattering everywhere. "She's the one who stole Frederick. She's the one who ruined my plan, that bitch Veronica Vance. What right does she have?" Her voice was sharp enough to be a shriek. Her exquisite makeup was ruined by tears, her eyeliner smudged into a mess, like a crumpled mask. Just then, the phone screen lit up again. A new notification popped up. Deep dive into Juliana Ashwood's dark past. Affair with professor during studies abroad, won awards through unethical means. Her throat felt as if an invisible hand was squeezing it shut. All her screaming stopped, replaced by ragged breaths. Number impossible. She tremblingly clicked the link, her pupils constricting. On the screen was a damningly intimate photo of her with her married professor from her time abroad, the caption searing. "Genius pianist. Or a homewrecker who slept her way to the top? Who leaked this? Who?" She shot to her feet, but her legs gave out, and she stumbled back onto the sofa. The phone continued to vibrate as messages flooded in. Juliana Ashwood's early competition scandal. Judge admits to fixed. Results piano community unites. Boycott disgraced artist Juliana Ashwood fan club announces disbandment. Each headline was a knife stabbing into her heart. She clutched the phone, her knuckles white, her expression shifting from panic to a cold, chilling fury. "Veronica Vance, it was you, wasn't it?" she whispered, a twisted smile forming on her lips. "If I'm finished, then you're not getting away clean either." Late that night, in the Four Seasons Hotel in North City, Frederick was in no better state. He lay slumped on the sofa, surrounded by 7 or 8 empty liquor bottles. He grabbed his phone and instinctively dialed the number he knew by heart. His fingers trembled. For the first time in 3 years, he wanted to call her on his own accord. Beep, beep. After a long wait, the call connected. Frederick opened his mouth. He wanted to ask why, to ask if Veronica was okay, to ask how she was doing. But in the end, "Why did you never tell me you were Vivian?" he roared, the alcohol and regret burning his throat. "If you had just told me sooner." The line was silent. After a long moment, a mechanical female voice said, "Sorry, the user you have dialed is temporarily unavailable." She had set his number to automatically go to voicemail. Frederick's hand and his tears fell at the same time. She wouldn't even deign to listen to his breakdown. Meanwhile, in a North City apartment, Veronica turned off the live replay of the press conference and walked out onto the balcony, lighting a cigarette, a recent habit. Her phone lit up. A message from Charles. "Latest news, Frederick's firm's stock has plummeted by 40. Do you want to?" She swiped the notification away. The night wind blew the smoke away, ruffling the hair at her forehead. 3 years of marriage, all laid bare in a single press conference. How ridiculous. In the firm's archives, Veronica stood silently between the shelves, her fingertips resting on a yellowed case file. The Rocco Malone murder case, this was the first criminal defense case she had taken on 5 years ago, right after she started her own practice. The defendant, Rocco Malone, had stabbed a coworker to death over a dispute at a construction site and was sentenced to death in the first trial. She had fought with all her might to get his sentence reduced to death with a reprieve, only to be grabbed by the neck and threatened by him after the verdict. "You bitch! If I die in prison, I'll come back as a ghost and haunt you now." That same case file was before her again. Rocco Malone had murdered a prison guard, and the second trial upheld the death penalty. He was appealing. Veronica closed the file and said flatly to her assistant, "I'll handle this case myself." 3 days later, Veronica ran into Frederick in the courthouse hallway. He stood in front of the defense counsel's bench, impeccably dressed, holding Rocco Malone's retainer agreement. "What a coincidence," he said, his gaze burning as he looked at her. "We meet again," Veronica sneered. "Since when does Attorney Cromwell take on death row cases?" He was silent for a moment before saying in a low voice, "I just wanted to see you." She walked past him without a backward glance. "Is that so? Perfect, I'll see you in court." On the day of the trial, Rocco Malone was led to the defendant's box in shackles. When he saw that the prosecuting attorney was Veronica, his cloudy eyes widened in shock. "You?" Veronica calmly opened her file. "Your Honor, the prosecution would like to submit new evidence during his incarceration. The defendant, Rocco Malone, violently assaulted fellow inmates on 3 separate occasions and was involved in the prison's black market." The projector screen lit up, showing surveillance footage of Rocco sharpening a toothbrush and viciously stabbing it into another inmate's neck. Frederick stood to object. "These incidents are irrelevant to the current case and cannot be used to prove premeditation in the murder of the prison guard." "Of course they're relevant." Veronica suddenly brought up a psychiatric evaluation report. "Rocco Malone exhibits significant antisocial personality traits and is at high risk of reoffending. And on the day the guard died." She clicked the remote, and the surveillance footage froze on the moment Rocco stole the guard's tactical knife. This was not a crime of passion. This was a premeditated murder. Frederick clenched his fists. The chain of evidence was too complete. He couldn't find a single flaw. As the judge announced a recess for deliberation, Rocco suddenly broke free from the bailiffs and lunged at Veronica. "You bitch, if you hadn't meddled back then, I'd have been out on medical parole years ago." Amidst screams from the gallery, Frederick lunged forward, landing a hook punch that sent Rocco sprawling. The bailiffs swarmed to restrain the prisoner, but the back of Frederick's hand was already covered in blood. Veronica stood frozen, her pupils trembling slightly. The Frederick from 3 years ago, who had shielded her at the courthouse entrance, now overlapped with the man before her. Due to the violent outburst, the trial was suspended. After a quick bandaging in the infirmary, Frederick found Veronica standing by a window in the hallway. He walked up behind her, his voice hoarse. "Back then. It was him too." She didn't turn around. I won the case and he nearly choked me to death." Frederick's heart clenched violently. He never knew she had faced such danger. "Veronica, Attorney Cromwell." She interrupted him, turning to face him, her eyes frighteningly calm. "Did you take this case today because you genuinely wanted to defend him, or was this just an act of self-indulgent sentimentality?" "Saying you took this case just to see me." "Frederick, do you even remember why you became a lawyer in the first place?" Her words were filled with mockery and doubt. Frederick opened his mouth, but her question left him speechless. When the trial resumed, Frederick made a decision that shocked the entire court. Based on the new evidence provided by the opposing counsel, the defense moves to withdraw the appeal. Rocco whipped his head around to look at Frederick, screaming obscenities from the defendant's box. But Frederick only looked at Veronica. "You were right. Some people don't deserve a defense." The judge delivered the sentence on the spot. "The death penalty is upheld and will be carried out immediately." As they left the courthouse, a torrential rain began to fall. Frederick caught up to her, holding an umbrella over her head. "I'll give you a ride." Veronica stared at the blurry streetscape in the rain and suddenly said, "Do you know why I married you?" Before he could answer, she answered her own question. Because that day you shielded me from Rocco Malone, I thought I had finally found someone who would protect me forever. She stepped into the rain, her voice shattered by the downpour. It's a shame that the one who hurt me the most was also you. Veronica Vance, his hand was already swollen and throbbing with pain. Frederick ignored the heavy rain and ran a few steps to catch up to her, but the continuous stream of raindrops falling from the umbrella's edge created a barrier between them, a chasm that seemed impossible to cross. I'm injured. Could you please take me to the hospital? He held up his bruised and mangled right hand, trying to appeal to her sympathy. Veronica's gaze fell on his hand, but she said nothing. At North City Central Hospital, the lights of the emergency room were stark white. Frederick lay on a hospital bed, his right hand wrapped in bandages, a wound from when he had punched Rocco Malone. Veronica stood by the bed, mechanically flipping through the medical report, her voice as calm as if she were discussing the weather. A minor fracture in the finger bone. You'll be fine with 2 weeks of rest. She closed the chart and turned to leave, but he grabbed her wrist with his left hand, holding on tightly. Veronica, Frederick's voice was impossibly hoarse. I've only just realized, I've always loved you. I was just too afraid to admit it. His eyes were red, as if he were about to pour out years of suppressed emotions. Juliana was just an obsession, but you're the one I'm terrified of losing. Veronica looked down at his hand, where the veins stood out, and suddenly laughed. Frederick, your love is so cheap. She pried his fingers off one by one. For 3 years, you treated me as if I were invisible. It's only after you found out I was Vivian that you suddenly fell in love with me. The sound of the rain outside grew more urgent, making her voice exceptionally clear. If I had been just Veronica Vance my whole life, would I have never been worthy of your attention? Frederick was struck as if by lightning. The blood in his IV tube began to flow backward as he trembled violently. Around the corner of the hospital corridor, a man in a baseball cap lowered his camera and made a call. Miss Ashwood, I've got proof they're getting back together. On the other end of the line, the sound of shattering porcelain was followed by Juliana's twisted, laughing voice. Excellent. Tomorrow, I want the whole world to see it. It was past midnight when Veronica returned to the law firm. Her assistant, Lynn, rushed over with a tablet. Vivian, how is Attorney Cromwell's injury? The internet is buzzing about you too. The screen was filled with trending topics. Frederick Cromwell injured, protecting ex-wife Vivance, all-night vigil. The accompanying photo was a blurry shot of her by the hospital bed, with Frederick holding her hand. The comment section was on fire. They're getting back together, go for it. Attorney Cromwell Vivian clearly still cares about him, Veronica sneered and slammed the tablet face down on the desk. So he's learned to play these dirty tricks now? Contact the PR department. Release a statement. An hour later, Stellar Law Firm's official account posted a solemn declaration. Attorney Veronica Vance's act of taking an individual to the hospital was purely out of professional duty and is unrelated to any personal feelings. Should any further rumors of a reconciliation arise, legal action will be pursued. At the end was the complete, unedited hospital security footage. It clearly showed her cold expression throughout and the final, decisive way she pulled her hand away. The netizens instantly switched sides. Does your face hurt, Frederick? She doesn't even want to talk to you. Professional courtesy being twisted into lingering feelings. Gross, you ignored her when she was willing to give up everything to be your wife, and now you regret it. It's his flawed character. He looks down on women who want to build a family and just has to trap ambitious women at home. In the VIP hospital room, Frederick stared at the statement, reading it over and over, before suddenly ripping out his IV and getting out of bed. His assistant frantically tried to stop him. Attorney Cromwell, your hand can't. Get out of my way. He tore open his hospital gown, revealing the bandage, and ran out into the rain with bloodshot eyes. He sped all the way to Veronica's apartment building, only to see her getting into a black sedan, holding an umbrella. A young man in the driver's seat leaned out, smiling as he took her briefcase. It was one of North City's rising criminal lawyers who had publicly expressed his admiration for Vivian. The rain blurred Frederick's vision, washing away all the unsaid words of repentance. In the shadows, a camera lens once again focused on the scene. Juliana stroked the newly received photos, laughing softly into the phone. Tomorrow's headline is ready. Vivian moves on with new lover, Frederick abandoned while gravely injured. Her fingers, painted with crimson nail polish, traced over the image of Frederick's rain-soaked back. She murmured to herself, "If I can't have you, then no one can. Let's all go to hell together." At 3 a.m, Frederick's phone vibrated violently. Juliana had sent a photo of a slit wrist, blood staining the edge of the bathtub, with a message. "Goodbye forever, Frederick." He shot up, his fingers trembling uncontrollably. Even though he had seen her true colors, years of ingrained responsibility made it impossible for him to ignore it. 20 minutes later, he kicked open the door to Juliana's apartment, only to find her sitting on the sofa with perfect makeup, a mere shallow scratch on her wrist. "You lied to me again," he said, his voice as cold as ice. Juliana just smiled, swirling the red wine in her glass. "If I didn't do this, would you have come to see me?" Frederick turned to leave, but was suddenly hit by a wave of dizziness. The glass of water she had handed him had been drugged. The last thing he saw before losing consciousness was Juliana's twisted, smiling face as she held up her phone, getting closer. "Tomorrow, the whole world will know that in the end, you chose me." The next morning, the hashtag Frederick Cromwell and Juliana Ash would spend the night together was trending. In the blurry, secretly taken photos, Frederick was disheveled and lying on Juliana's bed, while she, in a sexy nightgown, leaned against his chest. Veronica was swarmed by reporters the moment she left the courthouse. "Attorney Vivian, what are your thoughts on your ex-husband's night with his first love?" She glanced at the photo and let out a small laugh. "I suggest you all get your eyes checked. From this angle, you can see Attorney Cromwell's pupils are dilated, indicating he's clearly not conscious." She pushed the microphone away. "But it has nothing to do with me." That calm, "it has nothing to do with me," was sharper than any accusation. When Frederick woke up in the hotel, the headlines had already exploded. He stared at the photo of his unconscious self, his eyes dark. After a moment, he grabbed his car keys and rushed out. This time, a small recording pen was tucked into his pocket. When Juliana opened the door, she was still in the same nightgown, her smile seductive. "Miss me already? Delete the photos." Frederick turned on the recorder. "Otherwise, I'm suing you for drugging me, defamation, and violation of my image rights." Juliana's face paled. "You're recording me? Frederick, are you crazy? For that bitch, say one more word about her," he said, grabbing her chin, "and I'll make sure you play the rest of your life's piano sonatas in a prison cell." An hour later, Frederick's personal social media account posted a statement. "Miss Juliana, Ashwood manufactured a false scandal through drugging. Evidence has been collected, and legal action will be pursued." The attached audio file contained Juliana's full confession of the plot. The internet was in an uproar. The most toxic first love of the year, what's she doing playing piano? With acting skills like that, it's a shame she didn't win an Oscar. Attorney Cromwell finally woke up, but Vivian doesn't want him anymore, ha, serves him right for being such a poor judge of character. Some people are blind in heart, if not in sight. On the law firm's rooftop, an assistant cautiously asked, "Vivian, I guess you could say Attorney Cromwell got revenge for you this time." Veronica looked out at the distant neon lights, her tone calm. "What revenge for me? He was clearly just cleaning up the mess he made for his own reputation." A man like Frederick would never tolerate being played by a woman. As she turned, her phone lit up. It was a long message from Frederick, filled with repentance. Veronica didn't even read it before deleting it. Late that night, Juliana had smashed everything she could in her apartment. On the other end of the phone, her agent coldly announced, "All our partners have terminated their contracts. You've been blacklisted by the industry." She grabbed her car keys and rushed out, a crazed look in her eyes. If it was all over for her, then they would all go down with her. Veronica had no desire to get involved in the drama between Frederick and Juliana anymore. In 3 days, she had something far more important to attend to. The National Bar Association was co-hosting the North-South Lawyers Summit debate in North City. Not just Veronica's stellar law firm, but every major law firm in the country would be participating. It was a grand event. On the day of the debate, the North City International Conference Center was filled to the brim with mingling guests. On stage, Veronica, in a black suit with lips as sharp as a blade, stood behind a lectern labeled "The Supremacy of Law." Opposite her, Frederick, in a deep gray 3-piece suit, his expression calm, represented the theme emotion is the foundation of law. Her assistant whispered in her ear, "The world outside is in chaos, and he still dares to show up. His past record still stands. It's not unreasonable for him to be invited," Veronica said, unsurprised. "Quiet down, it's about to start." The assistant zipped her lips and focused on her laptop, ready to take notes. The moderator smiled and began, "Today's debate topic is a special one when law and emotion conflict, which should take precedence." The camera flashes intensified. Everyone knew this wasn't just an academic debate. It was the first public ideological clash between this legal world's tragic couple. Veronica, as the affirmative side, delivered her opening statement. "The reason law is precisely because it discards emotional variables," she said, her fingertips tapping lightly on the desk. "Imagine if a judge, out of sympathy, gave a murderer a light sentence. If a lawyer, out of personal feelings, distorted evidence in such a world, would we even need law?" She cited several nationally sensational cases. For example, the drunk driving case involving a rich heir from 3 years ago. Everyone knew what was right and wrong, but public opinion overwhelmingly called for a lenient sentence. In the end, the court resisted the pressure and imposed a heavy sentence according to the law, giving the victim's family the justice they deserved, that is, the dignity of the law. The room erupted in applause. When it was Frederick's turn, he remained silent for a long time. "I too once believed in absolute rationality," he said, suddenly looking directly at Veronica. "Until I was researching for a divorce case and discovered that all the statutes stemmed from the same original intent to protect the emotional contract within a marriage." The large screen displayed the first article of the Marriage Act. This law aims to maintain equal, harmonious, and civilized marital and family relationships. "The legal text is the skeleton, but emotion is the flesh and blood," he said, his voice growing hoarse. "Just as it took me 3 years to understand that what truly matters isn't how many cases I've won, but," his gaze, like a torch, fixed on Veronica. "I lost you." The entire hall fell dead silent. Under the shocked gazes of everyone present, Frederick stepped down from his podium and walked directly to Veronica. "I mistook obsession for love," he said, his voice so soft that the reporters in the front row almost dropped their cameras. "It was only after I lost you that I understood you were my only foundation." The pen in Veronica's hand paused for a fraction of a second. The Frederick from 3 years ago, who spoke to her so coldly in his study, overlapped and then separated from the man now bowing his head in public. She slowly rose, and as she passed by Frederick, she left a response that the entire hall could hear. "Attorney Cromwell, the law does not permit hypotheticals." She walked to the center of the stage. "Just as life has no turning back." The screen suddenly switched to a presentation she had prepared in advance. On the irreversibility of due process, emotions can deceive, memory can embellish, but legal documents are always in black and white. She clicked the remote, displaying the divorce agreement Frederick had signed 3 years ago. Just like this document, once it takes effect, it is never revoked. Frederick's face turned ashen. A woman in sunglasses suddenly stood up from the back row. It was Juliana. "What a moving performance," she shrieked, taking off her sunglasses to reveal a haggard face. "Frederick Cromwell, to win her back, you'd even repudiate a case you once defended." The media's cameras swiveled wildly towards her, but she suddenly threw a stack of photos into the air. They fluttered down, all of them love letters Frederick had written to her years ago. "Should I read aloud what you called Veronica back then? A boring porcelain doll?" Frederick clenched his fists. "I don't admit it, you forged those letters." Amidst the chaos, Veronica banged the gavel. "As you can see, ladies and gentlemen, this is a classic example of emotion interfering with the law." She coolly pointed to the scattered love letters. When private emotions invade the public sphere, the truth becomes the cheapest casualty. She finally looked at Frederick, her gaze like a judge delivering a verdict. "My argument is concluded." The debate ended with a landslide victory for Veronica's side. Frederick cornered her backstage. "Veronica, you have to believe me, I didn't know she would be here." Veronica stared at him for a long time, then suddenly smiled. "Does it matter? Even without Juliana, the problem between us has never changed. You only love the fantasy of me. I've always been me. I just changed my identity, and suddenly you start to regret. Suddenly you have a heart. Frederick, your sincerity is so cheap. Is your deep love a lie you've even managed to sell to yourself? As she turned to leave, Frederick suddenly called out, "What if I can prove it?" She didn't look back. At the South City notary office, sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Frederick's long fingers held a fountain pen, solemnly signing the last document. The soft scratching of the nib on paper was exceptionally clear in the quiet room. "Mr. Cromwell, are you certain you wish to transfer all of your assets, including your law firm shares, real estate, and investments, totaling $270 million to the Vivian Legal Aid Fund?" the notary asked, confirming one last time. His pen didn't hesitate, its tip drawing a perfect arc across the paper. "Yes, I'm certain." As he walked out of the notary office, his red-eyed assistant ran after him, his voice filled with worry. "Attorney Cromwell, if you do this, what will you do?" Frederick stopped. His gaze went past the bustling traffic to the distant spire of the courthouse, as if seeing his younger, ambitious self. "When I won my first case here 3 years ago," he said softly, as if to himself, "I only had $500 in my pocket." Now, he was just returning to where he started. He looked at his assistant. "You should head back. The firm is busy right now." "What about you? Aren't you coming back?" Frederick sighed softly. He still had something important to do. At the entrance of the Legal Aid Center, Frederick was about to submit his application materials. He had just closed his car door, a bulging manila folder clutched in his arms, when the screech of tires ripped through the air. Frederick turned, his pupils constricting. An unlicensed sedan was hurtling toward him like a wild beast. Behind the windshield was Juliana's twisted face. In a split second, he instinctively shielded the folder containing the aid recipient's files, but he himself was sent flying by the immense impact. In a daze, he saw Juliana's crazed smile in the driver's seat of the car. "Let's go to hell together." Her lips formed the words. Inside Stellar Law Firm, Veronica had just finished a cross-border conference call. She rubbed her brow, and the phone beside her suddenly buzzed frantically. Vivian Attorney Cromwell was attacked and is critically injured. He's in emergency surgery at South City Central Hospital right now. She stood frozen, her assistant's urgent voice blaring into a dull buzz. Half an hour later, she stood outside the ICU, accepting the critical condition notice from the doctor. "The patient has a fractured skull and internal bleeding. His chance of survival is less than 30, the doctor said quietly. "We need a signature from a direct family member." Veronica's eyes were fixed on the spouse line. The pen hovered for a long time. Finally, she called Frederick's parents. The wait stretched on endlessly. She sat outside the operating room, her gaze fixed on the digital clock on the wall, her thoughts a blur. A nurse brought her Frederick's personal belongings, a manila folder soaked in blood. Veronica opened it and froze. Inside were the files of the aid recipients her own firm was helping. She flipped through them, page by page. At the very back were Frederick's proof of assets and donation records. 3 months later, the Balance Legal Aid was officially established in North City. Under a barrage of flashing lights, a reporter held up a microphone. "Could you tell us why you founded this organization, and why this name?" Veronica looked into the camera, her voice clear and firm. "Because the law is fair, and it should always maintain balance, regardless of identity, status, or wealth." The room erupted in applause. No one noticed the tall, thin figure in a mask in the back corner. Frederick, leaning on a cane, quietly watched the dazzling woman on stage. For the next 2 years, they became the legal world's most familiar strangers. When she was fighting for millions in back pay for migrant workers, he was in the courtroom next door, providing sign language defense for a deaf defendant. When she was pushing for amendments to the Domestic Violence Sanctuary Act, he was in the countryside, providing legal aid to trafficked women. They would occasionally see each other at bar association meetings. She would give a slight nod. He would lower his gaze and look away, like two parallel lines, always close, never intersecting. In late autumn, the ginkgo leaves at the South City courthouse were as golden as ever. Veronica stood at the spot where Rocco Malone had attacked her, and in a daze, she heard footsteps behind her. Frederick stood 10 meters away, the corner of his black trench coat lifted by the wind. They looked at each other across a sea of fallen leaves, neither speaking. Finally, she turned and walked toward the steps. He looked down and walked through the archway. As they passed each other, a ginkgo leaf landed on her shoulder, only to be brushed off by the sweep of his coat. In an old apartment building in South City, a woman's cries pierced the night. A few lights turned on, but then there was silence. When Frederick kicked open the rickety wooden door, he saw the woman who had sought help from his firm being pinned against the wall by her husband, his hands tight around her neck. Her face was already turning purple. "The police will be here any second." He tore the abuser off her, shielding the woman behind him. "If you stop now, it can still be considered a criminal discontinuance. You'll have a chance at a reduced sentence." The man, Jack Barnes, ignored him, grabbed a beer bottle and smashed it toward them. Frederick turned to block it, and the bottle shattered, cutting bloody lines across his shoulder. "Damn you, mind your own business. So what if I beat her to death?" Frederick, holding a broken chair leg, stared at the crazed man opposite him. Behind him were the woman's sobs and a child's whimpers. They were at a standstill until the sound of sirens grew closer. The man cursed and fled through the window. Thank you, Attorney Cromwell." The woman clutched her child, crying, "But he'll come back and kill me and my child." Frederick wiped the blood from his mouth and took out a business card. "It's okay. The police will take you to the station for the night. Tomorrow morning, at 9, I'll take you to apply for a restraining order." At 3 in the morning, Frederick left the law firm and walked alone to the parking lot. 5 thugs armed with steel pipes suddenly rushed out from the shadows. "I'll teach you to meddle. Why are you sticking your nose in other people's business?" The leader, a man with bleached blonde hair, swung a pipe at his knee. The sound of bone cracking was sickeningly clear. It was the abuser's friends. Frederick staggered against the wall, then suddenly smiled. He took out his phone, pressed the record button, and as the steel pipes rained down on him, he calmly narrated. "On November 18, 2023, at dawn, I was attacked by Jack Barnes and his accomplices, location in South City." At the North City Supreme Court, Veronica had just won an international lawsuit when her assistant rushed over and whispered something in her ear. Her hands, in the middle of taking off her judge's robe, paused. "How bad are the injuries?" "Ruptured spleen, intracranial bleeding. He just got out of his second surgery." The assistant handed her a tablet. The South City News headline was shocking. "Renowned lawyer attacked in retaliation for heroic act, now in critical condition." Veronica looked out at the pouring rain. After a long moment, she said, "Send a bouquet of flowers." The assistant cautiously asked, "Should I write a card?" She shook her head, her fingertips unconsciously tracing the edge of a case file. In the South City Hospital, Frederick awoke in excruciating pain. The white chrysanthemums on the nightstand stung his eyes. They were the kind of flowers usually seen at funerals. "Attorney Vance had them sent," the nurse explained softly. "She said, she wishes you a speedy recovery." He suddenly let out a low laugh, laughing so hard his wounds split open, the gauze turning red with blood. "How can you be so cruel? You won't even grant me your hatred." Outside the window, the last sycamore leaf was beaten down by the wind and rain. Late that night, Veronica's phone lit up twice. The first time, the caller ID showed South City Hospital. She guessed who it was and, after a moment, silenced the call. The second time was an unknown number. When she answered, she heard only faint, weak breathing. 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Just before she hung up, she thought she heard a very soft "I'm sorry." 3 months later, at a legal aid charity gala. As Veronica took the stage as the keynote speaker, the spotlight swept across the back row. Frederick stood in the shadows, leaning on a cane, his suit hanging loosely on his frame. Her speech was flawless. True law is not a game for the elite, it is the last lifeline for the weak. Amidst the applause, a waiter handed her a folded napkin. Unfolding it, she saw the familiar handwriting. You were right, there was no signature. After the gala, the figure had disappeared. On her way back, Veronica's flight was grounded in South City due to a typhoon. On a whim, she had the driver take her to Frederick's apartment building. Through the rhythmic sweep of the windshield wipers, she saw a blurry shape on a balcony, a pot of withered white chrysanthemums. She stared at that window for a long time before finally looking away. News of Frederick's critical condition reached Veronica on the 3rd day of her appearance at the International Court of Justice. She had just concluded a 7-hour-long debate, securing massive compensation for fishermen affected by a multinational corporation's pollution. As she walked out of the courtroom, her assistant hastily handed her a phone. The screen displayed a single, brief line: Attorney Cromwell's old injuries are infected. Doctors have issued a critical condition notice. Veronica's steps faltered for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. She locked the phone and calmly instructed her assistant to arrange a flight back. It wasn't until late that night, in her hotel room, that she received the letter. The envelope was plain white, but the handwriting was painfully familiar. She stared at the sender's name for a long time before slowly opening it. The letter was short, only 3 lines. In my life, I won countless cases, but I lost you. The handwriting was still sharp, but the ink was much fainter than before, as if the writer had little strength left. Veronica stared at those few lines, and suddenly she remembered a night many years ago. They weren't divorced yet. She had stayed up all night organizing his files, preparing hot coffee and a late-night snack for him. They stood in the quiet study, one standing, one seated. She looked at the files on his desk, then at the dark circles under his eyes. The case was difficult. He had been up for 3 days. "Do you think you'll win this time?" she had asked softly. He had let out a low laugh, his voice filled with the familiar confidence she knew so well. When have I ever lost? It was true. When had he ever lost? Looking at the self-assured Frederick, she had thought she could spend the rest of her life taking care of him just like this. But later, things changed. They had still ended up where they did. She closed her eyes, folded the letter in half, and then in half again, before feeding it into the shredder. Amidst the hum of the machine, her assistant came in to remind her that the press conference was about to begin. Veronica stood up, adjusted the collar of her suit, and turned to walk toward the stage, into the glare of the spotlights. She didn't look back once. Years later, a new statue was erected on the central lawn of the North City Law School. It was a bronze figure of a woman. Her gaze was slightly lowered, her left hand holding a law codex, her right hand extended forward, palm up, as if silently supporting some heavy conviction. Engraved on the base was a single line: "Justice never bows." VIVIAN, on the day of the statue's unveiling, the law school was packed. Reporters, students, colleagues from the legal world, and even several Supreme Court justices were in attendance. "What makes this statue special," the dean explained to the media, "is that the scales of justice are not in her hands, but are cast into the base because true justice never needs to be deliberately held high." Veronica stood at the very front of the crowd, dressed in a simple black suit with no jewelry, save for a small scales of justice pin on her lapel. A young student stood on tiptoe, whispering to a friend, "Is that her? The legendary female lawyer. I heard she won an international environmental case and even pushed for the revision of the Anti-Domestic Violence Act." The friend nodded, then added in a lower voice, "But I heard she used to have a thing with Frederick Cromwell." Frederick Cromwell, the saint of legal aid? Didn't he pass away a long SHH? Don't talk about that. It's all in the past. The whispers died down. A white-haired old professor stood by the statue, answering a reporter's questions. A reporter, having caught the earlier whispers, pressed on. "It's said that Attorney Vance and the late Attorney Frederick Cromwell were once a golden duo in the legal world, and were even married. Is that true?" The old professor pushed up his glasses, his gaze sweeping over the crowd before finally resting on Veronica's serene profile. "No," he said, slowly shaking his head. "She has always belonged only to the law." Veronica's expression didn't change in the slightest, as if they were discussing a complete stranger. After the crowd gradually dispersed, she stood alone before the statue, her hand lightly touching the cool inscription. The sun set in the west, stretching her shadow long across the lawn, all the way to the ginkgo tree at the far end. In a daze, she seemed to see a tall, thin figure standing under the tree, the corner of his black trench coat lifted by the wind. Just like that day, they passed each other at the South City courthouse so many years ago. But she knew there was nothing there. Just like the letter that had long since been turned to shreds, just like the words that were never spoken. She drew her hand back and turned to leave. In the distance, the setting sun was the color of blood, like a sigh from an old friend.